Okay, it's 7:05, so we can get started. So welcome everyone to another interactive session of the 2022-2023 of the academic year. We are pleased to host you tonight's session with the program director to answer any question that you have about the interview process of the dual degree program. And just a reminder to everyone in here, especially for all of our attendees, that tonight's webinar will be is the part of the ongoing supporting applicant webinar series, and we encourage all of the attendee today to be looked out for another registration coming up for the next webinar, which will be on September 29th. So, and also I just want to remind everyone that the webinar tonight will be recorded. So if you have for some reason you step out of the computer or you want to go back to revisit some of the content that you are missing today, it will be posted on our YouTube channel, and then we will keep everyone updated. And now I would like to turn our microphone back to our wonderful panelists in here, and would love to have them introduce themselves, so including the institution that you are representing today. So to be more efficient, I will be calling you by name, and feel free to introduce yourself and also about your background. So first, I would go with Dr. Diana Milwick from UT Health and MD Anderson Cancer Center.
Yeah, hi. Hi, everybody. It's wonderful that you're joining this webinar to learn about interviewing for the MD PhD programs. I am an MD PhD graduate of the University of Texas Southwestern, and I now direct another UT school, UT Health in Houston, and the MD PhD program there is a joint program between the Health Science Center and MD Anderson. Both of them are located in the Texas Medical Center and are right down the street from each other. I myself do research on genetically triggered vascular disease, and I absolutely love being a physician scientist.
Thank you, Dr. Milwick. So next I will go with Dr. Stephen Lenz from University of Iowa.
Hi, I'm Steve Lenz, happy to be here. I'm also an MD PhD, a physician scientist, graduate of the MSTP at Washington University in St. Louis, but I've spent most of my career at the University of Iowa. Like Dr. Milewicz, I'm a hematologist interested in vascular biology and thrombosis and coagulation. So I spent most of my career mainly in the lab, but also seeing patients every week as a physician scientist. And I'm the director of the MSTP at the University of Iowa, Carver College of Medicine in Iowa City. We've had a funded MSTP since 1977. So we were one of the first, maybe we were 14th or 15th, I think, among the now 50 some MSTPs that are funded by the NIH. And we're getting ready for another season of interviews coming up soon in a few weeks.
Thank you, Dr. Lenz. So next, I would go with Dr. Neil Chi from UC San Diego.
Hi, thank you for the invitation to join today. I'm really excited to actually meet all of you. Again, my name is Neil Chi. I'm from the University of California, San Diego, and co-direct the Medical Scientist Training Program of the MD PhD program here at UCSD. I am also an alum of an MD PhD program and an MD PhD that splits his time as wearing multiple hats as some of my other colleagues of directing a program administratively, because I'm also the Assistant Dean of Physician Scientist Education here at UCSD, and I still am clinically active. And in fact, I'm currently in the CCU and running a lab. So it's definitely very fun. And I look forward to actually sharing a little bit about and answering any of the questions you have about physician scientist career pathways.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chi. So next, I will have Dr. Hannah Broom from the University of Mississippi.
Thank you, Min. I'll echo my co-panelists here and say thank you so much for inviting me to participate this evening. I am from the University of Mississippi Medical Center. I'm an alum of the school. I earned my PhD in biochemistry and have transitioned into education administration over the last few years. And so I'm new to the program director role within the last couple of years for our MD PhD program. I work with a co-director who is a physician, an ER physician, and we both work together to direct the program. And we are also kicking off our interview season here in the next couple of weeks. So I'm excited to be here and answer any questions that y'all have about the process.
Thank you so much, Dr. Broom. So next, I will have Dr. Alicia Vanoni from the University of Miami.
Thank you, Min, and thanks everybody for being here. Very excited to address your questions. I'm Alessia Fornoni. I'm a physician scientist by training, although a little bit less traditional. I did my medical degree in Italy and my PhD between the NIH and the University of Miami, where I am now the co-director of the STP program and the chief of the Division of Nephrology of Hypertension, and I direct the Drug Discovery Institute. I'm very excited to be here. If there is one thing I have to say, this is a wonderful career. 25 years into my job, I feel like I'm paid for my best hobby, and I'm happy to share this with you as we go in the Q&A session. Thanks.
You're muted. You're muted, Min.
Oh, my apologies. So thank you so much, Dr. Vanoni. So next, the last one will be Dr. Brian Scott from Michigan State University. Feel free to introduce yourself, Dr. Scott.
Hi, I'm Brian Schutte from Michigan State University, and I'm the co-director of the DO PhD program in the College of Osteopathic Medicine here in Michigan State. And I'm a basic scientist. My lab studies craniofacial genetics of disease and development, and happy to be here and answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schutte. So to all of the panelists today, on the behalf of the APSA virtual conference, we want to say thank you so much for being here. We are so grateful that everyone took your time out of your busy schedule to come virtually with us today to share any wisdom, any advice to all of the folks who will apply as a career physician scientist upcoming cycle. And my name is Min Pham. I will be your live moderator today. And I'm currently a postgrad student undergrad at UCLA. And also in the chat box, we have two other members who will have moderating for our event today. We have Eva, who will be the Q&A chat box moderating today's class. So it's Eva. And also we have the Danny Matos, who will be doing the volunteer live tweeting today on Twitter for everyone. Any question, answer will be. Okay. And for those, I want to remind one more time. So for those of you who are stepping away from the webinar or missing a piece of it, as a reminder that the webinar will be recorded. As the moderator, I just want to remind everyone that please submit all of the questions to the Q&A box, and we have all of and also we have some of the pre-submitted question on the registration. So we will ask that question first, and then we will go over the chat box. And I would highly encourage the panelists to interact with our attendee via the Q&A box as well. If you have any questions, feel free to type in. And also, I'm on the chat box, we also have the chat directly with all of the attendees. So if you have any major announcement, any general question, feel free to put into the chat box with our attendee as well. I think that's all of the announcement that I have. So thank you so much again for being here. So now I will go ahead and start with the first question that will be submitted to the webinar. So the first one will be, so what made an applicant stand out in the interview? Any panelists want to take on this question?
All right, I'll start. Go ahead, Alicia.
I'll go ahead and start and say for us, what it naturally starts to trend as being something that stands out is when a student is very visibly excited about or engaged in research and the past research experiences that they've had. You can very easily kind of parse those students apart from those that might be just regurgitating what they wrote in their essays for their application. So that's definitely something that stands out to us is a visible excitement about research and the career in research.
I want to
Yeah.
say on that, I really think that the most important aspect is passion. This career is not about getting free medical education. So this career is about nurturing a passion and a strong sense of intellectual curiosity. So when I see eyes sparkling, when you talk about a research idea and hypothesis, what would you do? The dream to be able to touch the sky and with discovery is really what make an applicant a very strong one and somebody who can really express that passion in a very humble and compassionate way without a arrogant, I can do it all mentality. So those are all aspects that for me are extremely important. You know, you're all very competitive, you all come with great scores, MCAT a little bit plus minus, but we know that these are not correlated to successful outcome in physician scientist career, no? So really the grasp of intellectual curiosity is what count the most for me.
Dr. Shuti, you want to say something? I saw you unmute.
No, it's fine. They did great.
And Dr. Chi, I also saw you unmute earlier.
Oh, I don't know if I'm on mute, but Min, actually, you went out. So can you just repeat the question one more time? I think I know what it is just from listening to the answers.
Absolutely, yes. So what might an applicant stand out in an interview?
Yeah, you know, I would agree with my colleagues here. I mean, I think research is a real key component, but really kind of sort of thinking about in the terms of thinking about research and impact of how that might be with biomedical scientists, biomedical discoveries. Really thinking about, have you really thought about what it means as becoming a physician scientist? What that, what sort of, what trajectory that might be, what your long-term goals are. So research is definitely one key component, but right, research can be for those who are interested in pursuing a PhD, but those who have sort of that interest of melding the two of actually being a physician and a scientist is sort of a kind of a key component of the sort of the physician scientist career pathway. So it's very much in line with what my colleagues are saying. That's sort of things that we're kind of looking at for these, for the candidates.
So I will go to the next question. So the second question is, the applicant asked, are all of the interview will be virtual? Do we have any in-person option?
Yes.
Ours are in person. Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing both.
We're doing just virtual.
Yeah, we're doing just virtual, and I think I saw something from the National MD PhD Directors Group, the great group, that 90+% of MD PhD programs are doing virtual or mainly virtual interviews. We do plan to do in-person second visits, you know, pandemic allowing, and we decided not to go with an option or a hybrid, just to make sure we maintain parity and we're unbiased and didn't put any applicants who were maybe at financial disadvantage, you know, in a bad spot, having to make that decision.
Same philosophy for the University of Miami. We are doing first round of virtual only to allow to capture the underserved, and we will do the revisit in person.
I would echo what Steve and Licia said. We are the same. We are virtual first for that very reason of equity. Inclusion is a very important aspect for us at the University of California, all across the campuses. And as Steve said, we recently had a meeting in the last week or two where actually it was polled, and the greater than probably 90% are probably along the lines of doing virtual. And more broadly, my understanding of the AAMC is the medical schools are beyond just the MD, PhD programs. We're thinking along the same lines just for the medical school. But that means that we still have an opportunity, as Steve mentioned. I think many of us are thinking, you know, it's hard to make a decision if you don't see the campus. So a second visit's kind of nice so they can see the campus. I don't know how people managed 2 years ago to choose a school without seeing it. So, and they did. And I think it worked out well for everybody at the end of the day, but it was really quite interesting.
Yeah, I think this is the new normal, not only for medical school interviews, but residency and fellowship. I was talking to a fellow today on rounds. We're just starting fellowship interviews, you know, and they're all virtual. And that's a challenge for those guys to match at a program that they haven't seen. So everybody has to get really good at Zoom interviews.
Yeah, I agree with Steve. I think
World
they're
we're
here to
in.
stay.
Thank you, Dr. Chi and Dr. Lance. I think that those are the good answer into segue for another question. So when you mentioned about the two separated program, so the next question they are asking is that are there a separating MD and the PhD interview for each of the program?
At
Well,
our
I'll jump-
institution, we do,
yeah.
oh, sorry, Steve.
Go ahead.
At our institution, the medical school interviews the candidates separately from our MD PhD admissions committee. And in terms of timing, we have done it both ways where those two interviews are on the same day. And we've done it where they are on different days.
Yeah, so all the applications are through AMCAS. So you don't have to do a separate application to a PhD program. At our institution, we do MSTP interviews and College of Medicine interviews on the same day, on the same itinerary. But there's sort of a morning set of interviews with the College of Medicine and an afternoon set of interviews with MD, PhD faculty. But we try to make it, we're actually learning to do it better by Zoom. This is our second or third crack at it. So we're trying to make it more efficient and simpler and less stressful for the interviewees by, making the day a little shorter and getting it all scheduled at one time.
So we do a little differently at Michigan State. So we have the same, the medical school is reviewing the students. And then we also meet with them in the afternoon as the DO PhD program. But then they also will come in later to interview with specific graduate programs that they're interested in pursuing. And that is the graduate program pays for that trip for them to come and visit, so they can see the campus and to see the program in person.
We do something similar at UMMC where the graduate school will bring back our MD PhD admitted students, and we will kind of speed date is what we call it through the different grad programs. Yeah.
Yeah, we keep separate interview for MD and MD PhD. We make sure that in the day for the MD PhD, the directors are met, some committee members are met, and scientists that are requested by the applicants are met, which personalize a little bit the interview process for them. One thing I want to say is that I think I'm proud to say that the MSTP program have a lot of saying into whether we want a student to be admitted or not, and we can twist the arm of the medical school. Should medical school feel like the applicant is not very strong, we can actually overpower that if we feel like the individual fit the criteria for a perfect physician scientist.
Thank you to our panelists. The next question is more about research. So what the attendee asked that if you have multiple significant research experience, at least for 1 year, maybe more than 1 year, which one should I focus on with an interview to talk about?
I think that the interviewees should be prepared to talk about all research experiences because it's not unusual that the person interviewing will look at the list of research experiences listed on the AMCAS application and know one particular area and focus their questions in that area. So I really recommend the interviewees go back and review the science, the hypothesis, and what they did in the lab, even recontact the lab if they don't know what the end result of their project was, and be prepared to discuss any of those research experiences. And we don't want to hear about, you know, how tough it was to clone that little fragment into the plasmid or whatever. We want to know that they understood the overall hypothesis and the goals of the project, and then talk about what difficulties they had and how they overcame it. And the entire time they should be passionate about research.
I so much agree with Diane, and I really would start being prepared for the project you like the most, the one where you know you're very excited. No, that will not betray you, but be prepared to address questions if the interviewer asks you about other research project you're engaged with.
Yeah, I agree. You know, you should know them all, but be prepared that someone may ask you to pick one. You know, tell me one you're excited about and describe that. And what we're looking for is, have you really thought about the big picture and thought about the research in depth? We're not interested in the techniques you learned very superficially in one summer after another. You know, if you're really passionate about science, you will have thought about the big picture and how what you did fits into what the group is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what everybody says. I think Steve hit the kind of the word for us, or the way when we think about it, it's a little bit depth actually. So I may have misheard the question, but there may have been a component of time, and oftentimes in terms of thinking about being able to speak about research deeply and in depth and understanding it, sometimes it takes a little bit more than a year of time doing that sort of research. Especially if you're passionate, you're going to want to do it, and then it comes out very easily when one speaks about it. And that's what we're looking for. As Diana said, we're not, the techniques is not so much as important as really, did you understand what you were doing and how passionate are you, and what sort of things would you do following up those particular studies. So one has really thought about it and really passionate, they'll be able to figure that out, and they'll shine in the interview.
So again, we value depth over breadth, and you got to remember these interviews are going to be very short, and so practice that elevator talk. And I would really focus on that one project where you have ownership. That's the word I like to use, is ownership. You understand it forwards, backwards, and you know the words that we've heard: hypothesis, the significance, interpretation. Hopefully you've been able to participate in that side of science too, and if you have, you can get into that, and that's really an important part of science, and it demonstrates that you're already on that path of becoming a scientist. So that's great to see.
I'll echo Brian on the significance part too, and the relevance or translation. Often students will, like Diana, I think mentioned, get into the weeds of the steps to clone that into a plasmid, you know, and we want to know that the student has also looked at that project from a 10,000 foot or 30,000 foot level and kind of seen where it fits in or could fit in a bigger picture.
Thank you to our panelists. So the next question, we will switch a little bit to the Q&A box along with the chat function to see if we have any question. Currently, I saw Dr. Shruti is typing on the chat also. But the question from Mackenzie asked that, how can an individual best prepare for an MD PhD interview?
So I started to write, I'll just answer. We've already had two similar questions, and both of them research really stuck out. And that's what sticks out for us too. Somebody who is already on that path towards becoming a scientist and has demonstrated that through the work that they've done as an undergrad or as a post-bac or wherever they're at. And again, we value depth of the research, and you know, if you're passionate about it, you're going to own it, and you have to be able to demonstrate that. And again, I'm going to say practice that elevator talk, because these interviews are going to come and go very quickly, and you may be really crushed for time in order to get that to share that passion.
I would say, I would answer the question a couple ways. One is, do everything you can to be prepared for a Zoom interview. You know, check out your computer technology ahead of time, log on early, think, practice that a little bit, the Zoom stuff. And then the other advice I would give is really try to be yourself. Don't try to be someone you're not. You know, don't try to project something that you think we're looking for. One thing I really enjoy is the story of how you became to be interested in applying to an MD PhD program. People come from all different perspectives. You know, when I was in college, I never thought I wanted to be a doctor. I was like going for science. I thought I'd do a PhD, and I said, oh, there's MD PhD programs. Maybe I should take a look at those. And so I got in, I became a doctor, and I found I've enjoyed being a physician. But other people start out wanting to be physicians, and they don't have opportunities to do science for a while, and then they find their way to that. So I kind of like the diversity and the different stories, and I think don't be afraid to tell your story, because we're looking for people with all sorts of different stories. However they found their way to this career, it has to be the right career for you. So that's what I enjoy about the interviews, is the passion for science and hearing the path, that everybody's traveled to get here.
I think
Then
this
I
is
would
the
go
most
ahead.
common, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I think this is the most common word we have heard tonight, passion. I think that should send a very straight message to all the attendees. And, one thing that I want to say, it makes it a little bit more difficult on Zoom to really connect and show the passion. But don't forget that eye contact is important also if you have a remote visit, a remote interview, So look at your camera when you talk and make sure you show the passion. We can see it from the sparkle of your eyes, and it's important to demonstrate that. Anna, sorry, I spoke over you.
Oh, no, you're good. I agree with everyone. I was going to add, kind of echoing what Steve said about being yourself and being genuine. I tell students a lot of times, you're not interviewing with us to be a physician scientist. You're interviewing with us to be a student in an MD PhD program. So we're not expecting you to know all of the things that a physician scientist knows. We want you to be teachable and eager and show an attitude that shows that you are reflective and you've got the grit and the passion to get you through a 7-year program, which is the length of ours. So.
Hannah said to me, it's really interesting, the grit. That's actually a key component, actually. It's a long program, 7 to 8 years. And actually it's interesting, in some of their annual directors meetings, we talk about what's one key component that actually tips off that student's going to do well, going to make it through and succeed, and actually grit. And then so along the lines, I think Steve said, talking about how you got there and became that decision, some of that actually is somewhat helpful for us, because it really gives us an idea of, as Alicia was saying, how passionate you really are in the end of the day. And are you really making an informed decision? Do you know what you're getting yourself into? And some of the things that where you may have gone through that may not have been such great points in your life that you overcome actually helps. And in many ways of helping us understand that you really are committed and very interested in this career path.
Thank you to our panelists. So I just want to thank you so much for before we moving on to the next question, I just want to make a quick announcement that the session today will be recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. So all of our moderator is gathering all of the questions submitted in the Q&A box, the chat box, and also the pre-submitted questions. So we will try our best to address all of the questions. So if for some reason we cannot answer all of them, we will work with our virtual content to see if we can send it to the panelists to follow after maybe all of the questions. Hopefully we have that answer by the end of the day. So the next question is also from the Q&A chat from another anonymous person. So how would you recommend an applicant respond to the research related interview question if they do not know the answer to?
I can start. I personally don't mind, you're here to train, to learn. If you're humble enough to say, I really don't know, but I can guarantee you I will know by tomorrow morning because I cannot sleep peacefully over unanswered questions. This is a question that would turn me on, because what I tolerate the least is people sitting comfortably on ignorance that doesn't desire to improve. There's nothing wrong in being ignorant. You're going to by being a physician scientist at any stage of your career, you need to accept to be ignorant. I'm ignorant in so many ways, but being humble to admit it and to actually commit to the work to make that, to change that, is what make the physician scientists maintain that inquisitive mind that will be transformative.
I think you should answer that question the way we encourage students to answer questions during their qualifying exams for their PhD. You can say, I don't know the answer as to whether protein A interacts with protein B, but I do know that there's this interaction and that's important for this disease pathway or something. So, a little bit of the bait and switch over to what you do know so that you can illustrate your knowledge in the field that you were working in.
I think it's fine to say you don't know when you don't know. There's so much we don't know. But again, I look for the passion. The answer I would want to see is, boy, I don't know, but that's a great question. What should I be thinking? Wow, thank you. It's the same idea of, going back to the lab and thinking about that and knowing the answer by tomorrow, but don't try to fake it whenever you do.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. So the next question is more about the application. The question is, when should I expect an invite for an interview? And if I do not get accepted for many interviews or receiving any acceptance, when should I reconsider to reapply?
Actually, Min, can you repeat that question, please?
Yes. It's a long question. So when should I expect an interview invite? And if I do not get accepted any interview invite or receiving any acceptance, when should I reconsider to reapply?
So everybody needs to understand that the interview and acceptance season lasts a long time. Seems like it lasts most of the year. In our program, we have already started offering interview spots, and we will continue to interview through the end of December. Some programs interview into January and maybe even a little bit later. We do most of our interviews between late September and late December. And it's a rolling process, so we're going to continue to be inviting people for interviews during that whole time. And our program works on a rolling acceptance pattern. So we will start accepting people for admission to our MSTP within a few weeks after the interviews in some cases. But we will continue to do that all the way through the spring, often into April or May. as a lot of students hold multiple acceptances and are on wait lists and hold lists. And I think we all wish the process would get over sooner, but it tends to be getting longer rather than shorter in our situation. If you don't get in during that season, you can apply the following year, but that would be I think your soonest opportunity to reapply. The other thing that might be interesting to listeners is, I think the most recent data, there are about 1,800 applicants to MD PhD programs every year, something like that. And about 600 to 700 get accepted or get matriculated. So about a third of all the people who apply to MD PhD programs get in somewhere. But obviously those 1,800 applicants are applying to multiple programs. So each program has, hundreds of applicants. And, that's why the interview process. I've asked the question, how many students are interviewed each year? And I don't think we have that data. We don't know exactly how many of the 1,800 applicants to MD PhDs actually get interviews, because the programs don't report that data. But I think it would be interesting to report that data in the future and get a sense of that.
I was going to say, or add on to that about if you don't get in, what do you do? Use your resources. Contact the schools that offer it. I know our school offers post-application counseling to really sit down and look at your application with the admissions staff, talk about areas that you can strengthen your application. So do that. Don't necessarily only rely on your own judgment, right, to improve your application for a reapplication. Our school offers a non-traditional or alternate entry path into our MD PhD program. This may be something that's offered at other institutions also. We accept current medical students into our MD PhD program. So I think one of the chat questions was, when or how do we decide, what are the signs that we would recommend a student to take the MD only versus MD PhD? Our admissions committee will often recommend to an applicant to reapply for our MD PhD program as a medical student after they've taken the opportunity to get some additional research experience as a medical student. So that is another pathway into our MD PhD program at UMMC.
Yeah, just to add to the interview season, many of the programs start up at different times. I will tell you, for us, we are one of the later schools. We will not start our interviews in January. So those of you who are interested in UCSD, we may not start inviting people until later in the fall, and this is actually quite true for different schools. You can, as you heard from Steve from the University of Iowa, and probably many on the line may start their interviews already this month. Others, it does seem like the West Coast schools will tend to start a little bit later. And it does sometimes seem to be regional. So don't panic if you have not quite heard now. It is a long season, and as Steve mentioned, it can very well go out into April. And I think Hannah's point is good, and I think we, for certain, and other MD PhD programs will accept students from the medical school phase. Obviously, no guarantees, but that is an option. Sometimes you're not sure, or you realize when you get into medical school that you want to go down that pathway. So, and I think it's, a way that the MD PhD programs are thinking about encouraging students into the career pathway is through, after spending a year or two in medical school, maybe having even a little bit of research time in medical school, like, hey, this is really cool. I want to try this out as an actual career pathway. And certainly have students, and probably others on the line have students that have come through that pathway.
So I agree with everything the other panelists have said. I want to say one thing though. So if you come in with a reapplication years later, because this is career you really want, please highlight what you have done in the past year to make your applications more competitive. What I hate is to see the exact application coming in 2 years in a row with no sign of improvement, just stubbornly thinking, I deserve it, I'm good, I have to get it. Listen to what Anna says, develop your, reach out, see what you can do to improve, get feedback from others.
By and large, the best thing you can do to improve your application if you want to go MD, PhD is to do more research and hopefully get your name on some publications.
Yeah, I would say that if you reapply and you've not done any research in the year in between applications, that's a red flag, a negative red flag for us.
Thank you to our panelists. So the next question is very specific question. So it's from another attendee. So this is a very niche question. So the attendant asked that if anyone had any thought about the Oxcam, which is Oxford and Cambridge program, if they have ever had any student to go through, they would be interesting to hear about more, and then what factor into the interview.
So I can speak to that, I guess. We've not had an Oxcam trainee, but we've considered it a couple times over the years. The issue for us is that if one of our students is getting their PhD in Oxford or Cambridge or at the NIH, how to really engage them in our program. Because our MD PhD program is a lot more than just getting a PhD and getting an MD. There's programmatic activities that our students participate in that we think are valuable to their development, their career development as a physician scientist. And so we would have to, on an individual basis, try to figure out how to integrate that Oxcam student into our program, not just come in for the medical school years. It's probably a little bit easier now since we've all gotten used to virtual activities. You know, it was a real challenge in the past when a student was off campus, but now it may be easier to participate in programmatic activities virtually than it was in prior years. So we would entertain those applicants on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, we've had one experience with a student at NIH, and they did their research at NIH, and it just so happened that one of their primary mentor here at Michigan State had a collaborator at NIH, and so they ended up spending 2 of their 4 years of graduate work at the NIH doing their research there. But that was kind of a special case because, you know, it was a strong collaboration between the primary mentor at Michigan State. So trying to do 2 different sides of the training at 2 different places, again, as Steve says, we have this really integrated system, and we think that's what students need, and that's what we would prefer.
So we have currently 4 Oxcam students in our program, and as the person who may have asked it and others on the line might know, is actually the Oxcam, there are different tracks. I don't remember them. I think there are 3 tracks in different varieties, some that were highlighted by Steve and Brian. We have them in actually every flavor possible. Those that have actually start their medical school and then go off to Oxford. We've had others that have done it at Oxford or Cambridge, and then they've completed their PhD. I think what Steve might be mentioning, and then coming back and actually coming to our medical school. And then we've had one that actually decided who came into the MD PhD program, but that decided not to come through our UCSD program, but through the OxCam, because he was accepted to both and decided to go to OxCam, but he's still part of our MDP, part of our medical school, which was a very interesting situation. It's a kind of an unusual one. So we do, and it's not frequent, but we do have a history of it. I think we've graduated at least 2 or 3 in the last 5 or 6 years. So it can happen. Integration is, I appreciate what Brian and Steve said, that is a key component. That is the main, one of the biggest components of an MD PhD program is the community. And we have worked hard to try to integrate these students at different levels. But without going into details, we have figured out ways to integrate them, not only through activities, but we have also communities within our MD PhD program where they have big SIBs and little SIBs, so that these students, when they do come to our program a little asynchronously, they are hooked up with students actually within certain communities within our MD PhD program. So it's an interesting question, and I don't know if there was a part of the question as to how to make that decision. And I think you kind of have to read and explore the different options within OxCam. There could be somebody that you're really interested at Oxford or Cambridge or the NIH. That's often what happens. And then what happens is they decide to do a PhD there, and then afterwards they apply to medical school. So I would highly encourage those of you who are interested in that pathway to kind of read it, because it's a little bit, it's a really interesting pathway, but one that you have to be sure that you understand, because there isn't a guarantee to getting into a medical school after you get your PhD. You do have to apply, but where the guarantee comes in, I believe is the NIH will help support the medical school thing. So interesting question.
Thank you to all of our panelists. So the next question is also from the Q&A chat box. So this question is about the MMI interview. So do any of your institutions have conducting the multiple mini interview format? And if so, how do you recommend preparing for this?
Well, I guess I'll go first and admit that we have the MMI. I think that people of the medical schools have different policies or even reevaluating the MMIs, but we have the MMI. With regards to preparation, it's interesting as the medical school says and recommends, and I would kind of agree with that. There's not much that you can do with actually preparing for it. Per se. It really is meant as a way to see how well you can communicate on your feet. So, how one prepares for that is a tricky question. So, and the questions are not necessarily why you want to go to medical school. They're actually usually medically related questions that there are no clear right or wrong answer necessarily. It's more how the candidate actually approaches answering that particular question. So preparation is a little bit tough in that sense because really what we're testing for, or the goal of the MMI, is seeing how one communicates.
I'll offer a little bit of advice on how you can prepare for an MMI very generally and broadly. With an MMI, like Neil was saying, they're really looking at how well you communicate. Well, how well you communicate depends on, in a lot of ways, have you taken time to reflect on your experiences that you've had in your life and fit that into a relevance for yourself. And use the experiences that you've had to inform your stance on a particular scenario or circumstance, or your stance on, your opinion in a matter. And so big ticket items that you can kind of concept map or reflect on from your own life are things like, what do you value in leadership? How do you resolve conflict? What is an effective team environment or an ineffective one? And can you, in an MMI scenario, not only kind of give your stance on that or your opinion on that, but pull from your own personal experience and explain how that is relevant? That's having a conversation with the rater or the interviewer, and it's showing them that you're a person, you're a real person who has had experiences that have informed where they are in their life and how they, present and how they have opinions on things.
Well, I'm glad we didn't have that when I applied. I think I would have flunked that. I just wanted to be a scientist. We don't use the MMP or whatever it is, the MMI, but we have a similar, we have some questions like that. Just reflecting on how times have changed.
Thank you so much for all of the advice. So we can go with one more question and then we can wrap up for the webinar today. So the next question is also from the chat box from Meghna. So the question is, to what extent and the nature of a clinical experience must a strong candidate for an MD PhD program?
So at Michigan State, it's quite important because the process we do is you're interviewing, your first interviews are going to be with the medical college. And so they're looking for that. It's as important to them as the research is to the basic scientists that you're going to be interviewing with later that day and in a couple months. So and we're in the osteopathic college, so the DOs. And so if you're interested in osteopathic medicine, then obviously those medical shadowing experiences, the medical experiences, you need to have that experience in the area of medicine and that discipline that you're interested in. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, at the University of Miami is also extremely important to show sufficient shadowing experience. While I personally don't believe that's key to become a great physician scientist, I have to say the medical school, I mentioned before, we can twist their arm, but if there is not a sufficient number of shadowing hours where you really feel like you get really the passion also for the medical profession, I think this is actually a red flag for the application for us. So it is important.
So I think we're looking that you've had enough clinical exposure and you've thought about enough that you really know you want to be a physician. And there's not a minimum number of shadowing hours to do that. And fortunately, we've been able to convince our College of Medicine admissions committee not to count the shadowing hours or to give MD PhD applicants, to consider that in a different perspective. And we've also reminded them that there are diversity and opportunity issues with this shadowing. Not everybody can afford to go on a mission trip to Honduras and have a bunch of hours of shadowing, and we do take that into account.
It's also hard to do put the hours into the research lab and also do the same amount of clinical work that a typical medical student does. And we realize that, and our medical school realizes that also. So if you're putting your time and effort into doing research, that's really what we want to see. But at the same time, we need to know that you understand what you're getting into in terms of medicine. So, but just not to we don't expect the same extent as we do for a typical medical student.
Thank you so much for all of the panelists answering the question. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming today, and thank you everyone for joining us for our Q&A session today with the current student. I just want to say that the participant, all of the this session won't be possible without the support from all of the panelists, as everyone in here, and also for all of the participants who make this session very interactive, and also so many people from the APSA Virtual Content Committee, JEDI Public Relations Partnership Committee, Gabby, Stephen, and APSA leadership. And without all the work, this webinar won't be possible. And we just make sure that students from underrepresented medical application will receive the work as well. And we are currently planning in the process for the next webinar coming up for the next interactive section. So feel free to stay tuned on our social media to look out for the next event, and also on our email as well. And I just want to say that on behalf of the APSA Virtual Content Committee today, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Fornoni, Dr. Milwick, Dr. Broom, Dr. Chi, Dr. Lance, Dr. Shuti for coming today to help us. And we wish you to have a wonderful day, and hopefully you will come back to our next webinar in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.